there's a line one can cross where you're no longer actually savoring life. You're recording it for others, and in the process of recording it for others, you miss out.
Hi, and welcome to the Living Richly podcast. My name is Rob Dale, and I'm here with my great friends Trevor and Eric. And welcome. Hang on one second, guys, because there's something going on here. Clearly, hey guys, look up. We are starting the podcast.
Oh, Hey man,
dude, like.
What's up?
When
did you get here?
That has got to be the worst opening of any one of our episodes so far, but
I believe you can do better.
We tried.
Do we want to keep that?
No, seriously, like you could turn off your volume or something. Sorry. And you just sent me a message because even when I'm disconnected from my phone, I am not disconnected from my phone because I get notifications on my watch.
Oh, do you?
Welcome to the Living Richly podcast. It's so great to have you here with us. And that's our really bad attempt to humorously introduce the concept of both being present and dealing with being, in a distracted world of devices and everything else that keep us from doing that. Really, it is a big challenge. It's a big issue that we see in society. We'll talk about some numbers in a little bit, but we thought it would be helpful to kind of just, again, unpack for how we see and kind of our ideas around the notion of what it means to be present. That seems to be one of the buzzwords that so many are using today. Oh, I'm just going to be in the moment. And most people...
Wait, how do they say it? How do they say it?
In the moment, right? It's.
Can you say that with helium balloon voice?
No, the buzzword that philosophers and spiritual leaders have been using for millennia.
That's right. Yeah, it's just a buzzword.
Like a lot of ancient beliefs and traditions, they become buzz phrases in our culture today, it seems.
Oh, I like what you did there.
And thank you for... So
I like that it went from a buzzword to a buzz phrase.
Well, it is a phrase. It's being.
I want to see it go to Buzz Lightyear.
One word.
It's true.
I think it should go to Buzz Lightyear.
It is a phrase.
Special shout out to Buzzsprout for
hosting our podcast. There's a lot of buzzing going on.
Okay, so let's talk.
I feel like our conversation is distracted right now.
Is it?
Can you focus us in, Mr. Host?
It's like herding cats.
Apparently not.
No. Okay. Do better.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for tuning in today, and we hope that
we hope you're actually still here.
Yeah, no. So let's talk about being present.
Yeah,
it is a big topic in the sense that, again, there's lots of opinion. As you said, this is not a new concept, and yet it seems to have taken on some new language. In a previous episode, we talked about the notion of rest. So when we start to look at the idea of being present, it fits into that idea that everybody kind of, if you said to somebody, hey, do you think it's good to be present, to be in the moment? Very few people are going to say no. But yet we don't seem to really understand the concept well, at least when it applies to living richly,
right?
And all of this concept. So maybe just quickly, what do we mean when we talk about being present, being in the moment? What does that look like for us? What does it mean?
Well, I mean, for me, like a phrase I've come up with, because for so long, most of my adult life, and thankfully that's shifted, but most of my adult life, being in the moment is something I really struggled with. Probably I would describe the vast majority of my thought life was preoccupied with either regrets of the past over mistakes I've made and things I wish I could get a mulligan or a do-over on.
Yeah.
And so my thoughts were often there, or obsessing about the future. Obsessing about, how am I going to accomplish this? How am I going to overcome this? Which meant that in the moment, I was physically present, but, mentally checked out. And again, not like completely, but checked out enough that the impact on my first marriage, the impact on my kids as a much younger leader, and this was my context. I struggled to just show up. Right. So I think when we talk about being present, it's literally learning to be in the moment that you're in. And the phrase that I've come up with for myself that really helpful is to focus on what I'm doing while I'm doing it. So whatever I'm engaged in, is to give that my fullest attention as opposed to trying to do multiple things at the same time. I'm not sure if that's how you view it or if you see it
I think
differently.
it's a great way to put it. I mean, I know that I'm a great multitasker.
Can we talk about that for a second? Because I was thinking about that, but I wanted to give space. I wanted to give space, but I was like multitasking. Like go back. When was that? Was that like a decade ago, where that was like everyone being encouraged to multitask more, and that this was going to be the key to productivity, going back toward the episode we just did on rest, right? Or we did recently on rest, and how we're slaves to this notion of the hustle culture, it seems. And it was interesting because I remember, like, it was in every book, it was in every leadership productivity book, it was every blog, every article on Fortune magazine, and all the Entrepreneur and all the others, like and Inc. It's all about multitasking, only for later the research to come out and demonstrate how it actually caused a major drop in productivity. And now the research is pointing towards what they call deep work, which is this notion of attention on one thing at a time for a substantial amount of time until you get it moving forward. So there's been a major shift in society, but I think we haven't caught up. We haven't caught up to the research, and we're often multitasking both in our personal lives and our professional lives. There's so much going on up here that, even in this conversation, my mind could be in a million different places.
Right. Yeah. What do you think, Trev?
I have a lot of browser windows open
right now.
That's all I can think about.
So
right now in this moment.
So it's interesting because I've it's on the other side.
Oh, it's on the other side.
I've seen your laptop when we've been doing some work together or something, and you'll have your laptop open, and that's usually my first reaction is, oh my God, what are you doing? You've got like 150 browser windows open or tabs.
You know what's a great gag for someone who does that, and I can be the same way. I'll have like so many, like when they're not looking, go on their laptop, type up or bring up a website that's playing music in the background. and then they're sitting there forever trying to figure out where the music's coming from. Yeah. Because there's like 50 open tabs and they can't tell.
Well, except that most of the browsers now have...
I'm a bit devious that way.
They've ruined that because now what they do is they show you a little speaker.
You get an icon.
You get an icon telling you which browser window is
Damn
doing that.
them.
But even that, we know, like any computer software engineer will tell you, you're actually limiting your browser when you do that because it's depleting the memory that each window takes, and it depletes it. You lose battery. Everything happens when you try to do things like that. But yeah, you do. You have a lot of browsers open.
I do. It's interesting because that conversation about the data have actually been around for a while, but it keeps getting talked over by the culture that people are trying to live out, and so then the data has to come back and kind of reassert itself.
It's the data has become an inconvenient truth, right? We don't want to look at it. Yeah.
But everything tells us every bit of data out there. Like there's no question around it. Tells you unitasking is where it's at. So just because
I like that unitasking.
We
think
like
unibrow,
I guess, right? Like it's
what? What?
Talk about distracted. All right, back here.
Rob, be here right now in this moment. I think we lost our host.
Oh, it's so bad. So I don't blame him. I don't blame him. Right. It's people pride themselves on how fast they can task swap and jump back and forth, right? And people
context switching. Right?
Yeah, it's like going from thing to thing to thing to thing, thinking they're more effective, but they're not. Yeah. They're not. Like just over and over, every single study reinforces in anywhere in the world that your attention goes down, your quality goes down. We know that when you're distracted, people have a false sense of productivity. That's probably what's happening for me, is I have a false sense of productivity with the windows open. There's documented drops in IQ.
Right.
The more distracted we are while we're trying to do things. So like we're literally getting dumber and less productive, but feeling like we're doing it better, or because people are like, listen, you're going to just have to figure out how to do these two things at the same time.
And when you said that, as soon as you said that, my mind immediately went to the 2x4x2 model, which tells us that when we get anxious, the more anxious I get, the dumber I get. The more anxious we get as a group, the dumber we get. And in many ways, that busyness and distraction is a form of anxiety, or at least produces a measure of anxiety. Would it not? Like, because your mind is scattered and trying to hold many things in your conscious attention, which we know the conscious mind can't do.
Can't do it. Yeah.
Can't do it well.
100%. And it maxes out after about an hour to 90 minutes of focused attention. And then you need to take a break, not switch tasks.
Right.
You need to actually rest. We talked about rest in a previous episode. We need to rest our minds and create a little bit of space around that in order to let it recover, because people forget how much energy cognition takes. That's why we want to turn everything into a subconscious process or routine or habit or script, because figuring everything out is mentally exhausting.
Right.
And it's a muscle you can't flex for a very long time. Then you have to back it off. So like people with really high level trained levels of focus, it's like 90 minutes. And then you need to take a break. And Rob, I remember you're telling us you're on a cruise and there's a guy whose like job is to walk around and like, I don't know, look for debris or boats or rocks or whatever.
Bodies in the water.
But he can't do a long shift, right?
Right. No, they keep their shifts very short. Even the whoever the captain might be, the entire crew that are on the in the board. Why am I blanking on the bridge?
Yep.
Thank you. I'm totally blanking on.
I'm no big city captain.
Are you distracted, Rob? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm all good.
You're good.
Thank
okay,
you.
Just checking in.
Yeah. Sorry. Who are you? Yeah. But
I'm still trying to answer that question.
All of the people on the bridge work in 4-hour shifts.
Because it requires so much attention.
Because it requires But to your point, the spotter, that's we had a chance to do a tour of the bridge, and the spotter is literally just on one side and then walking over the other side, and he's just but all he's looking for is something that the radar might not pick up. Obviously, the ships I think they said they've got 4 redundant types of radar that
like
are
something flying under the radar,
but something flying under the radar, and that's what they're trying to. That's what they're looking for.
It's fascinating to me that right out of the gate we ask the question. So what does being present mean? And we go right to focus. And I think we're talking about the power of focus. And in reality, it is about putting our focus rather than letting our minds run away from us and letting all the background noise steal our attention. We talked about energy management in a recent episode. Rather than letting our best energy get eaten up by all this background noise, we're choosing to place our attention on what we're doing right now. I think to me, that's the best way to describe is this energy and focus on where I am, who I'm with, what I'm doing right now, and let the past take care of itself. The future I'll bump into soon enough, but focusing my time, energy, focus right in the moment.
And the goal here, when we kind of set the topics for our episodes, the goal today really is there's 2 in some ways different topics that we want to talk about, but they tie in so well together: being present and then in a distracted world, dealing with distractions, and these are conversations, and so we even how we flow into where we go with each part. I appreciate so much what you just said. Going back to, I love the language of focus more than even being present or in the moment, because again, the notion of focus it makes more sense to me. You introduced, I remember you were the one shared this with me. I don't know if it's original to you, whether you read it in a book, but it was. There
are no original thoughts.
Right. It was such a good. It was such. I'm having an original. No, I guess it's not original.
You've thought poorly of me before.
But you've thought it too, right? I don't even have to say it.
Probably. You guys are sharing a joint.
Oh no.
Yeah.
But you shared a really when we talk about being in the moment and how kind of almost the fallacy of what that is when it comes to what's a moment. Maybe share that, because I just love this concept.
Yeah, and I remember when I first shared it with you, you were like, "Yeah, I think you're high on drugs," but
it does make more sense.
Maybe
if you're a little bit.
Yeah. But this whole notion of the present moment, the present is a moving target. Because even you queuing up this question for me to be talking about it, that moment is already in the past. And there are moments that are in our immediate future that we're about to bump into. And we'll see where this episode takes us in terms of the future. But the present is it shouldn't be seen like this static, a hard set thing. I like to look at it like a flowing river. It's moving. And I think being in the moment, living in the moment, being present, focusing on what you're doing right now is, imagine yourself floating a raft, or you're in a boat floating down the middle of the river, and you're not getting hung up constantly on the riverbank of the past, and you're not getting hung up on the riverbank of the future. And it's not that I think the beauty of it is past, present, and future come together beautifully when we begin to see them this way, is that our past is always available to us to inform us, to teach us, to carry wisdom forward into the present moment or into our future. That's what our past, I think, and obviously memories and things that we treasure, our past is just full of those. And also hardship and things we've gone through that leave us hopefully wiser, right? More mature, more robust, more resilient. Our future, there's unexpected hardship probably that is awaiting us at some point. That's going to come too, but there's also a lot of great things in our future. So our future is there to inspire us. Our past is there to inform us, but we live all of that out in each moment by moment, right? Like it's in every even this episode, we could say that the recording of this episode is a bigger moment filled with tons of tiny moments that are happening in all of it. But the point is, I think as much as possible to bring my best self, my full self into each of those moments, as opposed to just being partially there or sort of in the conversation but checked out. And I know we tried to stage a distracted moment at the beginning of this, but like how many times does a conversation, when I was traveling recently, Kate and I noticed it, and we notice it whenever we go out, how many even couples are sitting at a table eating dinner together and they're both on their phones the whole time. So that is the opposite of being present. They are checked out of the moment, each having their own moment, but not certainly sharing one, right?
It is a challenge for a lot of people. Again, the idea of everything what you just shared resonates. Yeah, I needed, and this is where, again, why we're covering these topics together, is because the immediate response is, but when I try to be in those moments, I'm distracted by all these other thoughts. I can't turn my brain off. Right. I can't shut my brain off.
That's a common one, actually.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And so if I try to be in the moment, even when I'm in these, what we love about these conversations, and we really do call them conversations each episode, the ability to pause, to allow for silence, because sometimes we're totally engaged in listening to whoever is speaking in the moment. Other times we're checking our notes and they're talking and we're kind of hearing them, but we're also looking about what I'm going to jump in and say next. And it's a challenge to truly be in a moment with others, or even just on our own.
Yeah, and I think that's why we paired this with this notion of being present in a highly distracted world, is that a major source of or drain upon, if showing up in the moment is the goal, if being more present, more fully checked in to what's happening right now is the goal, then what are all the things that are stealing our attention away. And actually, let me backtrack. I don't like that language. That sounds very victim, like a victim, like somehow someone's doing that,
taking
to me.
it from you. Yeah.
No one is. We're allowing our energy to be redirected. We're making a conscious choice, whether it's conscious or unconscious. We're making a choice to allow our attention to be dispersed over many things as opposed to focused on one thing. And I think one of the biggest sources of that is our devices. Let's face it, technology, social media, our phones. I remember the day I had one of the first, I'm going to date myself now, but back in a sales job I had many, many, many years ago, I had one of the first portable cell phones. I don't know if you guys remember this. It was basically like a brick.
Yeah,
right, like the size of a brick with a little black antenna on it.
I read about these.
You read about these, yes, and like you could literally like this thing was like a mammoth phone, and now we hold the power of a supercomputer in our device. Like it can do anything, and it can do it very, very quickly. And it's our phone. It's our source of music. We work off of it. We communicate. We go on social media. We use it for calculator. We use it to help us navigate to another destination. I mean, this is like an amazing tool in many ways. But it has led to an addiction, I think, as a society to technology. And in many ways, most of us have become, and I'll say, like, I'm constantly checking my relationship with devices because I enjoy technology, and I've fallen prey to this more times than I care to admit. But we've become, in many ways, digital zombies. We're checked out. And in conversation, we're checking our phones, and we're on a Zoom call with our colleagues, and we're checking our email and surfing the internet, and right, like we're anything but dialed in to actually what matters most. And a big source of it is our fascination with devices.
3.5 hours a day. According to eMarketer.
What's your screen time?
Oh God.
What's your screen time? Pull it up.
According to eMarketer, the average North American is on their mobile device 3.5 hours a day, and they are on computers or TVs or whatever other devices 8 hours a day, and that's a 2021 study. So it's pretty incredible.
But what's your daily average? What's your daily average this
4
week?
hours.
Mine's 4:30.
Yeah,
for this
4:16.
week.
Now, to be fair, I do use it for work as well, but again, a big majority of that is just being on.
To be fair, I play Clash of Clans. That eats a lot of time. No, and
that's a category I forgot to add.
We're going to show the age here. I don't know how to. I'm like, I don't know. I don't
It's
even know
okay.
how to
We'll
find
show
that.
you.
I'm like, I don't know.
But I forgot to add. We also play on these, right? They're a major. We watch videos. And again, we could talk about social media. I think social media is worthy of exploration.
We do everything but actually talk on them.
Look at this guy. An hour and 14 minutes is Rob's daily average.
Down 27% from last week.
And it's down from last week. Good work,
Is your
buddy.
phone not charged this week? You just
No,
Is this thing on?
So one of the things. So
now I read digital books. I read but that's still.
I had an 8-hour drive listening to a podcast off my phone, so I know that skewed it a little bit.
Right,
but it's still like. That's a lot.
It's a lot of time. We spend a lot of time on there, and there again, we can make a case for all kinds of reasons why we use it. I don't think there's many people that will go, I'm not ever distracted by my phone, right? I think it's a problem. It's a very prevalent issue. And look at social media. And again, there's another one. I'm constantly checking my relationship with social media because I developed an unhealthy relationship with it during COVID. And so I'm constantly checking in with myself. But part of, my journey has been, to check in with myself. Like, think of how often we are in moments where so talk about being in the moment or not being in the moment. We're in a moment, but rather than savoring the moment, we're staging the moment to later post it on social media. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, but I think it's an important area to check in on, to say, am I actually showing up and enjoying it? Or am I taking pictures to capture the memory, or am I taking pictures to do something else? And again, that's a whole other topic, but I think it's a measure of not being present. I think I deliberately at times now I might take one or two pictures and I put my phone away because I'm like, how many pictures of the same thing do I need, as opposed to actually savoring what's happening
and
right
also,
now?
And I think you have to ask the question, so why am I doing this? Am I doing this because I need validation, or is there another reason for doing it? And it's interesting. And I will go back to, because, and I get that you went, oh, look at you with the number, it is I
was proud of you, man.
Well, thank you. It was a deliberate decision I made. And I'll use an example of this because in fact, this is the first time I've ever talked about this with anyone, that I made this decision. I remember back when we first started we had our box at the local arena, and there's concerts on. I remember one of the first concerts we were at, and it was so interesting to me to watch how, of course, from our box, you could see much of the crowd, not tens, but thousands of phones that were on recording the musicians doing a song, rather than people just watching the experience. And one of the things that I made that selfishly, I look at it and I go, even the other night we were in the box for a concert, just this
Journey and Toto.
Yeah,
Journey and Toto. That was a great concert.
There was one point where, again, I didn't touch my phone the entire night. I didn't need to, because I knew everyone else in the box would be recording stuff and tagging me in it, that I would have my stuff that I could save for later and everything like that, right? So I'm like, I don't need to be on my phone because everybody else will be on them and taking the videos and pictures and doing all of that kind of stuff.
But a bunch of years back, Carrie and I this was before kids, we were backpacking in the Andes, and we came across this one guy, and he had a fully manual camera. So no technology, no batteries, no anything. Like it was fantastic. It was this great rig he had. And his deal with himself was he could take one photo a day.
Wow.
And so he spent every moment really looking at what was going on around him.
Which one am I going to choose?
Little kids playing? Was it these pictures of these peaks? Was it this sunset or sunrise? Was it this Inca temple? Whatever. To exercise some judgment, saying, if I'm only going to capture one thing today, what will it be?
Yeah.
And there was, in some ways, some risk with that, because he was like, oh, if it's this sunrise, and you go, oh, but the sunset's even better. He's like, no, I made the choice. But he said, everything else, I'm just going to savor, really, really internalize, really try to capture with my own mind, rather than try and capture with a piece of technology, even a piece of, what we would consider very rudimentary technology right now. And it was really striking around that, because it helped him be very present.
Right. Well, I listen. We all three of us would have grown up with with film cameras, right? And I remember going on school trips as a kid, and parents would get you often the disposable camera, right? That had you could take 24 or 36 pictures, and 90% of them would come out. They would be horrible. They wouldn't, right? They were out of focus or whatever the case may be. But you knew you had limited availability. You had a runway there of options available to you. There wasn't endless, and things have changed. I mean, technology changes, and when technology changes, behaviors change, and when behaviors change, values start to change over time, right? And I just think there's been this movement. There's this growing movement towards our lives being put on display for others, and I've referred to this on other episodes. We've talked about this. It's almost like social's got this thing where we're thumbing through everybody else's feed, reading about their highlights or enjoying their highlights, and often at the expense of not really engaging with our own life, right? So I think it's an area that devices, social media, when we talk about being present, I love capturing moments and memories. It's one of my when I think of the four themes in my Living Richly blueprint, is creating moments. Like it's savoring moments and experiences with the people that matter most to me. So capturing a memory of that, or some memories of that, I think is very, very valuable. We're not suggesting otherwise, but it's this I think it's when you, right, there's a line one can cross where you're no longer actually savoring life. You're recording it for others, and in the process of recording it for others, you miss out, right? It's like maybe a great analogy is Steve, right? He's our producer. He's behind the scenes, and Hi, Steve. Hello. Hey. So thank you for doing that, so people know you're real.
Whoa, that's enough, Steve.
That's enough from you.
Slow down.
Right? But Steve, in order for us to focus on these conversations, Steve manages all the technology. He's capturing all the audio. He's capturing all the video. He's doing all the panning. He does all the post-edit work. And so he's here and he's engaging. And we've had talks about sometimes how the topics have your thoughts on it afterwards or in between podcast episodes. But his full attention is on capturing this, right? So I think when you're in that capture mode, the ability to actually engage fully in what's actually being captured is somewhat compromised. I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, right? This notion of like, my focus is on something else than the actual moment that I'm in, even though I may still enjoy it and still benefit from it, I'm missing something.
Well, the present is all there is.
Right.
And our body's there, but our mind usually isn't. Right. And so it's like getting mind and body in the same place at the same time puts us in the present, which is why I think so many practices are about start with your breath. It's actually connect and pay attention. Bring your mind's attention to your here and now, and you're always breathing. So it's always a great resource around that. And I think it's our ego that pulls us out of that present into either the past or the future, as you described, right? And it's pulling us away from where we are and in this moment. But the richest things are always in the present, right? The only things are actually only in the present. So even when we're imagining the future or reliving the past, what we're doing is we're like overwriting the present. Instead of being here now, we're taking our imagined future, frankly, our imagined past as well. Don't get me started.
We could talk.
It might be worth talking about how hindsight is never 2020.
Never 2020.
That's a bullshit statement.
But and we overwrite what's actually happening here now. So you'll see people in like, full on crisis out of something from the future or the past, but it's
trauma,
overriding their
PTSD.
present.
Like let's face it. Like sometimes we're just distracted by our past and are checked out of the present moment because we're upset, like thinking about our past or obsessing about our future. But there are times where trauma from our past, right, will just show up in the moment and kind of hijack our higher thinking. That's a whole other topic, right?
Absolutely.
That's a real thing.
And every bit of care around an anxiety attack is actually linking to the senses. Right. To say, right. It's, I forget the order, but it's like, what are 5 things you see? What are 4 things you hear? What are 3 things you can touch? What are 2 things you can smell? What's 1 thing you can taste, right? Like it's to ground you in the present, in your body again, reconnect the dots.
Yeah. So good.
And so, but because we only live this moment. Yeah. And which means everything is only now. I will caveat it with in this space-time continuum. Don't get me started in the quantum mechanics, because I do believe there's another way to look at it as well. But as we're living this experience, there's only right here, right now, which means everything is here now, which means this moment, if we go back to an earlier episode, is sacred as well. Right. It's as spiritual a moment.
You don't get to live it again.
Right.
You've got one chance. And again, when you think of how much time and energy is spent focusing on the other parts of that continuum. I remember hearing a speaker refer to, and this is recently, to one of our Olympic athletes in a recent Winter Olympic Games, and I'm not going to remember the name of the athlete. It was one of our downhill skiers, alpine skiers, and that he carries around in his pocket at all times a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper, right? And it's on it are so holding it sort of in landscape mode. He's got all that's on this sheet of paper. It's all folded in his pocket. And he pulls it out. When he unfolds it, there's 2 lines. That's it. 2 lines on the sheet of paper. So probably 1 inch to the margin on the left is a line from top to bottom, and 1 inch on the margin to the right is a line top to bottom. And every time he opens this, it's a reminder to him. There's his past. There's his future, talking about what's in the margins, okay? These are important, right? Like I said, there's tons of wisdom that we inherit from our past, lessons learned that we can carry forward, right? Our future can inspire us as we're working on future goals and envisioning the best version of ourselves. All those things are important. But that sheet of paper was a reminder to him that the vast majority, the largest section by far, was the center, which is now. All I have is now. It's actually all we're guaranteed. Right? It's all we're guaranteed is this moment right now. We don't know what's going to happen. And when we begin to really understand that, then we begin to, like, I think it inspires one to start to say, how much can I start giving? What if I turned up the volume of my attention, right? What if I turned up the volume of my focus and started to look for ways to do that in a more present way, more often, how I might start to savor life more. Because again, I don't think living your richest life, it's now. It's now. It's before. It's coming, right? But where it's fully lived is moment by moment, decision by decision, person to person, in the moments, experience by experience, memory by memory, right?
Yeah. There is so much. So maybe let's take a few more minutes to talk about because it's such an epidemic of digital zombie behavior that there really it has begun to consume us and in many ways takes over our lives. To your point, Wendy and I made the same observations when we're every night out at dinner, even on the ship, and again you've got these, in some cases, some great everything around you, and the amount of everyone has their phone on not everyone, almost everyone has their phone on the table, looking at it, doing this stuff. Table, husband and wife, they're both just sitting on their phones, right? Half the time we didn't even have our phones with us, or when you might take a picture of what we're eating, and then the phone goes away, and then the rest of the entire time is just us interacting, having conversations. So let's talk. How do we detox from devices? What are some of the things you guys do to be able to make that separation?
A book that I've referred to in other episodes, The Practice of Groundedness by Brad Stuhlberg, he talks a lot about this and strategies that he's used with, he's also a coach, and he works with high-end executive clients and athletes, and this is a major issue at that level, is the level of distraction, and let's face it, a cluttered mind is a stressed mind, because you're trying to hold, again, your conscious mind is not designed by nature to hold multiple things at once. It's actually designed to hold one thing, right? And anytime you start to the more you overload it, the more scattered, stressed, tired you'll feel, and to your point, the dumber you actually get. Your ability to think.
More tabs open.
Like, where's that damn music coming from? Right? Like that's really what's going on there, right? So some of the things, and I was inspired by. It really challenged me when I read that chapter, because that was back at a time where I wasn't happy with my level of use on the devices, and it's something I continually have to check in with. I mean, how many of us will, for example, sit there and watch a show, perhaps, or put a movie on or a series that we really enjoy on any of the streaming platforms, like, who's not loving The Mandalorian season 3, right? Like, or The Last of Us. Oh my God, right? Yeah, what a great series. But we put on a show, and here's a show we actually enjoy, and instead of just fully engaging in that and enjoying it, we're doing that while we're got our phone in our hand and
looking up the actor,
right? And then you realize, you look back and go, I've just missed the last 5 minutes.
Rewind,
right? And so you're really not engaging in either activity. And so if whatever enjoyment you're seeking to get is compromised, because your attention is compromised. So part of it is learning to put the phone away more. One of the strategies Stuhlberg encourages in his book is, if this is a problem for you, at a certain time of day, because if you use it for work, It's hard to just put the phone away, like if it's a device you need, but put the phone away at a certain time and put it in another room. And there's tons of research around this. Don't keep it in the room you sleep in. at night. Like, and right. And if you're concerned about, well, I might miss something, or I've got kids away at a sleepover and I need to check in with them, well, the recommendation is leave it even in the bathroom or in the next room with the ringer turned on. You'll still hear it, but you won't be tempted to constantly reach over and look at it. One of the things that was actually really impactful for me was, again, since COVID, and moving to a fully remote model, which we love now. We meet the vast majority of our clients, we meet remotely via video conference. But one of the things that was most impactful for me, and I started doing this probably about 6 months ago, is you ever sat with someone and you're trying to have a conversation, but behind you, this has happened sometimes in restaurants or public places or a bar, and you're having a conversation, but behind you is a mirror. And the person that you're talking to is distracted by their own image, and you can watch their attention constantly shifting. Right? It's very distracting, and you don't feel very connected because they're constantly seeing themselves in the mirror. Well, that's the same effect that video conferencing introduced to the masses when everyone was sent home to work and people jumped on to, for many of them, video conferencing for the first time. One of the best things you can do if you're on Zoom or Skype or Google Meets or Teams, whatever tool you use, is to turn off your self view. All of them have the option to do that. What I mean by that is you won't see yourself anymore. You'll see the folks that you're talking to, but your self view is gone. There's something there nowhere in human relationships or communication or conversation, is a best practice to be distracted by your own image constantly staring back at you. As a matter of fact, when they were doing the research on Zoom fatigue, one of the telling, or one of the most presenting issues that contributed to Zoom fatigue more than any other was this notion of constantly being distracted. How do I look? How do I appear? How am I coming across? This obsession almost with it. So
that's a good one.
In conversations, even in a work perspective, you can bring more focus and attention simply by doing something like that. The other is, do not disturb is your friend. Take control of your device, take control when people can reach you. If not, you're constantly a slave to every notification, every text, every message, every social media notification, every email. And that's just exhausting.
And even with that, most phones today, I use an iPhone. I know it's very easy to set up on an iPhone. You can set up favorites, right? So I've got my daughters.
I'm one of them.
One of my daughters is you are actually. But I
did we got that on record?
Yeah,
we got that on record.
Hang on,
wait. Let me ask you.
For me too.
Trevor's going to add us as favorites now because he's feeling a little awkward.
No, but I will say, I listed in my favorites.
Right.
I've got Wendy. I've got my two girls, and I've got the two.
But I'm in first position, right?
No. Shit. You're in fourth or fifth, depending on the moment.
Depending on the moment, he's constantly moving them.
Yeah,
I'm heartbroken.
I only had Steve on mine.
But the reason I set that up is so then I can have my phone in Do Not Disturb. I'm not being,
right.
I'm not hearing all the games.
People
I'm not
can
hearing
still
that.
get through.
But I don't have to worry that if there's a crisis, whether there's a crisis in the business or with just in your own lives or with my kids. Or with Wendy, if they need to get through, their message will still come through. It's so easy to set up, and then and 90% of the time my phone's on Do Not Disturb. Right. I hardly ever take it off of that because I don't need to hear all the other stuff.
Right.
So it is there are some of those. That's a simple practice. One of the ones that you first you started doing this with your phone was rather than put the phone out of the room, you were using your phone as your camera.
I'm still doing that.
Which then all of a sudden it's like it's out of reach for you to be looking at because it's up.
Well, first, like with the new technology on the iPhone, and I'm sure this is true on other devices as well. It's actually a better camera than you'll get on your laptop. Or even the cameras that you buy that are external that you plug into your computer. But what primarily for me is that gets the phone out of my hands and out of reach, so that again there's a greater level of focus and less distracting me. Turn off your email program. Like when you're there's another one, and this is in business context, and I want to love to hear, Trev, some of your strategies on the personal side perhaps, and business, but again, we have just many things happening all at once, and so how can we possibly be fully engaged when we're distracted by phones and email and our a constant stream of our live feed of ourselves in front of us? All of these things, I think, pull us out of the moment, and they do not help us focus. As a matter of fact, they do the exact opposite. They're highly, highly distracting.
Yeah, it gets it's interesting because these same distractions are the tools we use to do so much, right? And so the boundaries get really unclear. And so it's trying to figure out, how do I establish boundary in terms of these tools that I use day in and day out for work, for connecting with family, for recreation even, and how do I know when it's a distraction and when it's not? And it's not just because you're using it. Distraction is anything that's pulling us out of the moment.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So if I've got, one of my kids is, out with friends and is texting me, I can actually be in the moment with them texting, not distracted, because that's where I want to be.
Right. Of course.
And so there's a focus choice that's really important to help us understand, what's going on. And I think this is where technology is evolving faster than our behavioral adaptation is. And so we get a little overwhelmed by it, and all of a sudden it's everywhere. So here's us focused on this podcast with 7 screens in front of us, right? So we've got our notes, we got 2 phones, you guys have your watches, right? Like we're all surrounded, and that's us focused.
Right.
Right. That's with kind of mostly a lot of screens put away. Like they're ubiquitous now.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Right. You go, I remember even with the kids early on, if we went to a restaurant that had a TV, they would spend the whole time looking at the screen, right? Like it's just like, it's almost impossible to resist. Like behaviorally, it's really hard. And now we got screens everywhere. I'm not against screens. I love this stuff. Like it's useful. We get stuff done, connecting with people on the other side of the planet. Like I love that stuff, but it's also the only way I think we can manage our distraction is to know what we actually value and what we want to focus on.
Right.
Because until you define that, you kind of go, I don't know, is it a distraction or not? So like if it's to sit down and watch The Mandalorian, it's like, all right, I'm going to like savor every moment of this cinematic masterpiece. And, right. And soak it all up.
Have you seen episode 3?
I have.
Oh my God.
Did not see that coming. It's really good.
Yeah.
But to be able to
no spoilers here.
Where if we're going to be sitting down with someone we care about over dinner, then to be really present around that. There are times though also Carrie and I will sit down and say, let's go grab a bite and let's actually work on some stuff for the farm. And we're reaching out to people, and we actually are focused together,
right?
Using our phones in that moment over a meal.
You're showing
up.
You're showing up in that moment to focus on what you've agreed to focus on.
It's deliberate. It's choice driven, and I think that's the heart of it. Is when we're not choosing, then everything's a distraction.
Well, I was thinking, in anticipation for this conversation today, like what are some strategies to be less distracted? And one of the ones that came to me was, engage in more meaningful activities. I think a big part of our distraction, when we talk about living your best life, one of the questions we encourage people to wrestle with is, what are the things that make me happy? What are the things that fill my cup? What are the things that when I do them, I feel recharged and rejuvenated and like I've been plugged into a battery, right? Like I feel full of energy. I think when that's not defined, when people aren't clear on that, then boredom sets in, disillusionment sets in, blah sets in. And when we're feeling like that, the potential for being distracted by all kinds of things goes up. I don't know what the percentage would be. I haven't done formal research on this, but my guess would be it goes up exponentially. If I'm engaged in something I love to do, it's interesting. The more I can't wait. We're hearing the rain fall on the roof here as we're recording today, and I'm looking outside. I know the snow is beginning to melt. Can't wait to be back out on the water. And I find when I'm out there, yeah, I like to take some pictures of the scenery because I do see some beautiful stuff while I'm out there. But I am not distracted at all by it. Why? Because I'm engaging in something that I love. So the potential for me to be distracted is much lower. If I'm engaged in a really meaningful conversation with Kate or with you guys, again, very, very unlikely to be highly distracted. Why? Because it's something that energizes me. It's something that brings me joy. I think a lot of folks have not taken the time to figure that stuff out. And so as a result, they're just kind of coasting through life, and then anything that's bright and shiny will capture their attention. I think that's where screens, social media, technology does that brilliantly. It just captures our attention. And let's not forget that many of these social media platforms and devices and apps are actually designed to appeal to the addictive side of human nature to get us hooked. Like there's a real business model behind this. And I'm not trying to push conspiracy theories here. Just take what was that really popular game?
Candy Crush.
Candy Crush, like that one. Like I mean, it set whole new standards on how to get people addicted. Why? So that they'll pay to keep playing. And the Candy Crush made a fortune on that model.
You just line up the brain science, the behavioral patterns, and you can harness that.
So there's a business, right? There's a business around getting us distracted. Like it's a $1 billion industry,
and there always has been. Television is like fighting for eyeballs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so it's fighting for people's attention, and it's like, okay, that's fine, and we can make those choices as we do that. But the key is to get really clear on what you got. One trip on the rock here, like one trip of life.
Right.
What do you want to give your attention to, and do you actually know that? Do you have the answer to that question? Because if you don't, then the slightest bit of engineered brain science will have you. And if you do and say, it's interesting when people they're like, okay, I just need to relax. What they do is they'll go to their phone because it's a passive relaxation, but as opposed to an active relaxation where you kind of go, I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go catch up with my kid or my partner, my whatever, right? And unless we define that, we're going to be captured by this other stuff.
And
right?
that's not even mentioning the dopamine hits that actually
all the brain science.
It's all the brain science, right? Like the likes on social media, the shares, the comments, right? These dopamine hits that we get, and we literally can become addicted to those. But these are in many ways can be false moments. They're like pseudo moments, right? As opposed to meaningful moments that, again, we don't get an opportunity to relive. We get one chance, and that present moment's now gone. It's in our past now, right? And right.
But that's the upside, though, is this moment you can course correct. You don't have to wait for anything special, right? You don't have to wait for. You can kind of go, oh, you know what? I realize now I'm not in the present moment. And the moment you do that, and Eckhart Tolle tells us this: the moment you realize you're not in the present, you're in the present,
right?
Because it's a realization, right? And you can go, hey, you know what? I meant to be fully present. I wasn't. I was distracted. I'm here now.
Yeah.
And to fully be here, and that's all you have to do is just you don't have to beat the crap out of yourself. You don't have to judge yourself. You don't have to. But that act is a very powerful moment of will and of choice and of connection to things, to people, to moments we really care about. So the next time you see a gorgeous sunset and the phone comes out, sure, take a picture if you want, but then put it away and just soak it up.
Savor it.
And then also look at the other people around you soaking it up as well. Because actually there's a moment where they'll realize what you're doing, and sometimes they'll put their phone down too. And you get to have the moment. Use your phone, capture the memory, like all of that, but don't just be owned by that.
I don't know if this is an indication of how twisted my mind is, but as you're describing doing that, like other people will see you, all I can remember is as a kid, we used to walk around and then in the middle of the crowd to look up to see how many people.
Also, don't stare at the sun.
Don't.
Just a quick rule there.
And it is interesting, as I'm listening, it is interesting. It goes back to, even when it comes to our devices, I'm conscious of with all that we've talked about in Living Richly, we talk about what has worked for us, and you talk about even, you know, your need to kind of manage, you have to deliberately manage social media. For me, it's less of a need for me to be aware of it, because it's just not, I don't run to it as quickly as some. I got all kinds of other things that I get distracted with. And for us, there is this, because I envisioned, and you were saying about how you and Carrie might go and deliberately be responding to emails and that over a meal and everything like that. And I thought, oh, and that's so funny, because then somebody else is sitting at another table and
look at how disconnected they are.
Look at these sad couple.
And in that moment are completely distracted from being in their own moment, because they're focused in on what other people.
Well, unless
mind
they're
your business.
Unless they're engaging in deliberate people watching.
True.
If this is
which is a great activity.
Because people watching could be fun.
Right. Well, and then you made the comment about, you know, and then you see a beautiful sunset. Yeah, take a picture, then put your phone down and even look around at others. And I thought, yeah, and everybody else will still have their phones out or whatever. We're not saying any of this to be judgmental. There's purpose behind it. I miss when you were posting your intentions and those short videos every day. I love that. There were some days where what you would post would just trigger and there would be a reflection time of my own as a result. And I knew that, and I remember saying this, I had this conversation with Wendy, because Wendy very much does that as well. For her, one of her values is contribution, and she has a community that follows her, that she really does take serious she feels she lives out her purpose by contributing through some of these posts. But she's phenomenal at, again, we joke about, you know, she'll take a picture of a meal, make some kind of comment about this and that, and then I joke, am I allowed to eat now? Right. But we are joking, because the phone does go away and she's able to focus. You were when you shared that. Now, again, whether you do that or not, one of your values is that ability that you contribute so well with people, that there were so many, you were saying this at the time, so many people responding to you saying, oh, thank you for that. And you know, so if we're doing it out of even what enriches us, I'm not saying don't do these things. Now, mobile devices, we can make the argument easily. The research says this is unhealthy, the amount of time that's spent. We don't need to, there's no judgment on that. The research says too much alcohol, bad. Right. Whatever that is, excess in anything. But it is about, be careful to not be putting the focus on, well, what's someone else doing? Focus in on, again, being in the moment.
Why am I doing it? What benefit am I getting?
What's the outcome here?
Because even I'm glad you brought that up. Even the contribution piece can become an addiction, right? Where we're contributing. I check in on this, and this is why you'll see me at times post a lot, and then I take a break, and it's a reset for me. It's just to say I need a reset. And because I do like to inspire, I do like to share, I do like to contribute, but I'm checking in with myself to say, okay, but is it about contributing, or how many people are going to like this post?
Why?
And part of that is not a bad thing, because I do use it for business. I use it so sometimes you want to see what's working, what's not working, what are people responding to more than others. So part of that is just a business thing, but we just have to check in. I think each person needs to evaluate for themselves, what are the activities that I'm engaging in? Are these a deliberate choice, an intentional activity that is enriching my life, that is making me feel more energized, or is it an intentional relaxation kind of thing? Or am I just engaging in mind-numbing, distracting activities? Let's face it, let's go beyond mind-numbing and just distracting. It can become hiding, right? Like, there's a lot of folks, when we talk about being present, getting present in the moment with others is one thing. Mindfulness would say where it begins is actually with yourself. And I know for a long time, part of why I didn't slow down is I didn't want to be with that guy. I didn't want to come face to face with that guy when he's not producing and running 100 miles an hour. Like I didn't want to see or hear or get present to that stuff. Yeah. And so a lot of the activities often, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, can be like a hiding, running, avoidance sort of strategy.
I had a conversation with a friend of mine. This would have been a few years ago now, but they were somebody who every single night they were out with people, they were doing, and it was exactly that, is when it boiled down to it, it was, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be I don't want to be sitting in my thoughts.
Right.
Because just where they were in life. And so they feel, and other people would look, go, man, you're always doing stuff. And look at you, you're out kayaking, you're doing, like, you're hiking. Oh, now what are you doing now? And you're out doing all the stuff. And it was the do in order, because they didn't want to have to be in that moment of reflection or present. And so, yes, I think that can be just as addictive. The passive behaviors can be a problem.
Yeah, to your point, even healthy activities can be an escape. And there's a measure of escape. Like if it's retreat to recharge, retreat to energize. But I think if we're running, if it's an escape, we're trying to avoid something. And sometimes we're not ready to deal, and that's okay. I think the universe, we talked about this before. If we're not ready to deal in this moment with what the universe is kind of orchestrating for us, and we're like, no problem, no thanks, not ready. And the universe is like, okay. And then it'll just create a similar circumstance in the future and give you another chance.
Don't you worry one bit.
Don't you worry one bit. You won't fail. You just keep you get to keep taking the test over and over again until you pass, right? So even healthy activities, I think it's worthwhile to examine, why am I doing it? What's behind this, right? And because if if you're doing the activities to escape, you're not truly present. You're avoiding. There's something.
If you're present, it's not a distraction,
right? Right, because those healthy activities can fall into the distracting. Yeah.
Right? Like that's the measure. The distraction pulls us away from being present. And so because otherwise you kind of go, well, which activities? It's like, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. Right? If we're using it to avoid, if we're using it to not be here with self or others or whatever right now, that's a distraction. And so it's not just devices, it's any range of activity. And so that capacity, like, just kind of bring it full circle around, how do I become more present? So that because trying to fight off distraction without clarity about what are we actually after, you can't win.
No,
it's not going to play out. It's got to be the other way around. It's like, what am I really valuing here, and what is in this present moment, and then how do I make sure that mind is with body here now.
And I think a great way, I know for me in conversation, when I've part of how I continue to train myself to show up is, and you made a reference to it earlier, Trevor, is when if I'm in a conversation and find my mind wandering, like it's on different things, right? I'll check in with myself, and often that's just an internal dialogue. Say, whoa, put that aside, like focus here, like be here right now. And it's not a condemning voice. It's like a reminder. Hey,
a little nudge, right?
It's a nudge, right? And there are times I know. Listen. It's easier to be fully present in a conversation that you're prepared for and that is set aside for that purpose. But let's face it, life isn't always like that. Think of all three of us have kids, and they're not always waiting for the best moment to make a request or ask a question or share information with us, right? And I find in those moments, especially if I'm actively doing something else and Sam or the girls are trying to share something with me, that's like I'm highly susceptible to now not being in the moment, because my mind was on something else. They're now making a call to my attention, which I want to be present to. And one of the ways I train myself is if I'm struggling, I'll simply say, hey, listen, buddy, like, can you, Dad was just distracted there. My mind was on what I was doing, but I want to fully hear you. Can you just start over? I feel like I missed a couple of bits there, and I want to make sure I fully hear what you were trying to communicate to me. And it's a non-judgmental, non-critical, but I'm also signaling to the people that matter most to me to say, no, actually, I don't want to fake it. If I didn't show up, there are moments where I don't need to say anything. I just need to make the adjustment. But I find that just that acknowledgement Because if I try to fake it, but I just missed the first 3 minutes of the conversation because I didn't quite fully hear them, then anything I say is going to demonstrate I wasn't there for the first 3 minutes. Chances are the risk is high. So that acknowledgement is a reset, and it also sends a message, right? That actually hearing you is very important to me. I wasn't quite here with you at the beginning. Can we just start over quickly here and reset?
That's the word I was thinking too.
Yeah, that's such a vulnerable statement to make, to admit that, because they may say, oh, you're not, whatever response, but it's just, I love that. And
for every time I get it right, I get it wrong.
It's such a good,
FYI.
I'll tell you one
it's still working on it.
I heard this on another podcast a while ago, and I started doing.
You're listening to other podcasts?
This is the second time now he admits to listening to other podcasts.
Right. And
I don't know, Steve. I think we need to just take him out in post editing.
And it was a podcast.
There is no host. There is no host. Rob who?
It was a podcast that Steve was editing because he edits other podcasts.
Huh?
We're not his only one.
What?
No, it actually, this wasn't. I don't remember where
Do you host another podcast? Are you on another one?
What are we talking about here?
I'm distracted, Rob.
I heard this line, and I thought that's the silliest, most simplistic, dumb thing, but I decided to try it, and I can't get over it works. How often I will just say, no brain, we're not going to think about that right now.
I love that. You talked about that in a previous episode. I love that.
With sleep.
That's an interesting thought, but we're not thinking about that.
But we're not doing that right now. And I've done it even when I'm in conversations and I'm finding I'm drifting or whatever. That's an interesting thought. We're not going to do that right now. And I don't know why it works, but it works.
Because the brain's literal.
Because the brain's literal. You're right. Yeah.
Right? Because if you say, why am I so stupid? Your brain will go, oh, because of this.
Let me talk to you about that.
If you go, what's a smart way to solve this problem? Your brain will go, because this, and this. It just answers what you ask it. Yeah. So it follows instructions. So the fact that, and I think most people go, it's my brain, my thoughts, I have no control of it. Like, no, you totally do. Yep. You've got choice here.
And another way to get that control back when our mind is kind of just scattered on multiple things, because let's face it, we're human, and there are moments where we do this better, and there are days where we just have a number of things going on, and perhaps we're more tired, or we didn't sleep well the night before, or we're facing a big deadline, so we're under a bit more pressure than usual, or the kids are being more demanding than they usually are, right? Like there can be any number of factors that will compromise our ability to show up in the moment. So rather than beat ourselves up, there are these resets we can simply do. Another thing that I find really useful to do is to capture, if a thought comes into my head, rather than just tell it go away, especially if it's something I have to do, or it reminds me of a commitment that I made and I forgot to follow through, or I need to follow through, rather than try to file it into my memory, where, let's face it, I just turned 39 for the 13th year in a row. Finally, I really feel like I'm getting the hang of it. But to trust anything to memory is tricky, right? Like, because it's easy to forget. So sometimes it's like, can you give me 1 second? And I'll pull out my phone, and this is where I use it in a way that helps me. Note file, where I just capture things really, really quick. And I get the thought out of here. Because whatever you resist persists, right? And there's nowhere that's true more than in your thought life. If you try to resist, I can't be thinking of, I need to buy this for dinner tonight while I'm talking to Trevor. I can't do it. Guess what your mind does?
Yeah.
I'm already in the grocery store. I'm anticipating the lineup. I'm thinking of where it is, and I'm checked out even more. But if I took a moment and said, Trev, give me 1 second. I want to be here right now, but I just need to get a couple things. Okay, thank you. And put the phone away. Yeah. Then I think that's just, I don't think people get offended by that unless you're doing it like 100% of the time. But it's a great way to, why clutter the mind with information that can be easily retrieved later?
The reminders app on my my devices is my friend, and it's amazing. Even my kids will sometimes joke about this, or how often, no matter what it is, it's just I ask Siri to set a reminder for, even if it's
I try to use Siri, and I use Siri all the time. But when you two yahoos are around, as I'm dictating into my phone, you're cursing in the background, and all I end up with is swear words in a task list.
That is the second time you've used Yahoo.
Because you're Yahoos. But you're my favorite Yahoos.
Or yahoo.ca.
Yahoo.
Is that still around?
Being present.
Yes.
Just working with you guys has helped me to learn how to manage distractions. And that's my biggest tactic.
When did you get here?
Right, exactly. I really hope that through this conversation today that you've been able to pick up maybe a few ideas, some practices that you might incorporate. Again, if you're in a place where you're working through some of these distractions, maybe you're kind of putting your hand up going, yeah, maybe I am struggling with screen time, whatever that might be. Again, there's no judgment here. This is a recognition that we are all on a journey of learning how to live our fullest, our richest life. And part of that is the idea of really being in the moment, to be able to be present, to focus on what matters at that moment for us, and to be able to do that. If you really, again, we appreciate so much that you've been a part of this, taking this journey with us and part of this conversation. We'd love to hear your thoughts. We'd love to hear some of the things that you've done to learn how to put aside some of the distractions, to be able to be more focused. And please leave a comment on whatever platform you're listening to this or watching this. I appreciate you do that. Like the episode, subscribe to the podcast. All of those things help us. One of the things we always appreciate is when somebody leaves a review, whether it's just giving us that 5-star or leaving a comment with the review. That is so helpful to us to be able to get the word out to more people. But we do encourage you to do that.
And our website, livingrichley.me/act. After every episode, both the current ones that are being released, including this one, and all the episodes to date, all of the tools, resources, books, articles that we mention on an episode are listed there. And those resources are there to help you take next steps. And, when we talk about being present, like, get present to what you think you need to do. Like, what is one thing you might begin to do to start living a more focused life and showing up more meaningfully? All those resources will be found there. And perhaps in there, you'll find something that can really help you in that journey.
If you want to make it real, post your weekly average screen time in the comments.
Damn.
Wow.
Throw it in there. See what you got. I'll put mine in there.
All three of our followers just unfollowed us.
That's no, this is too depressing to look at.
That's too heavy.
But it's like a little bit of a gut check. Yeah. But the other thing is, if there's someone else that you think would benefit from this, share this with them. Tag them. Let them know. We want to be able to help. We want your help as well, and so we can do this together. So we'd love it if you can share that out, make it a little bit more, reach a few more people.
Thank you again for being part of the conversation, for listening in to the Living Richly podcast. Until next time, we wish you the best.